This is the final project presentation. Our group members are Jiwi Fan and MD Asif Bhuyan. Introduction. We choose to develop StarCraft AI with BW API. StarCraft is a very popular game, and this is one of the first games people play professionally in internet. There are three races in this game, and we choose Zerg as our race. We built an AI bot out of that. Our strategy to win the game is Juggling Rush, which is attacking as early as possible with attack units. First of all, we make enough resources to make the base units, and when we have the buildings to make our attacking units, we start to make attacking units as soon as possible. When we have like enough attacking units, we just go ahead and attack our enemy base. And as this is a very early strategy game, we most of the time we win as in the early game. Our biggest motivation to choose StarCraft was that StarCraft is a very popular game in our generation, and I used to play that in my childhood as well. And this is also a stepping stone for those who wants to do AI research in the future, as we want to become AI research, we want to work in AI research field in the future. We choose StarCraft. And the motivation behind choosing juggling was that implementing juggling rush is very easy to do, and it's beginner friendly, to be honest. Um, the strategy is very good. We just have to attack as early as possible without making the game too complex. So that was our biggest motivation behind choosing juggling rush. About our build order, we originally planned to use a build order in our proposal, but we found that that build order has a low winning rate. During the implementation process, so we improved that build order, and our new build order is as follows. First of all, we send workers to mine minerals, and when we have some resources. We send our workers to scout and call back if it has seen the enemy. Um, we build a spawning pool as soon as possible, and when the spawning pool is finished, we train zerglings. When we have six zerglings, we send the zergling to the enemy base so that it can attack us in the early game. If it is not successful and we are still running the game, then we build overlords when we have more supply. We also build extractor when we have 20 population. Um, uh, we never actually stop making workers or zerglings. Train some more workers and overlords when needed. Um, when we have like idle workers, we send them to mine gas after that. We also build hydraulic train then, and when it is finished, we chain a hydraulic. We upgrade our base when we have like enough resources. We keep doing that. After that, we build Spire. In one case, against the Protoss race, our winning rate is very low. So we make actually Mutalisk, which is a flying unit, so that it can attack the first against the Protoss race. That is actually very effective than Hydralisk. So we train Mutalisk instead of Hydralisk when we play against Protoss race.
So what I have done for the project, first I implemented part of the build order, including extractor, hydraulics, and mutalisk training. I was in charge of the combat units control, which is a millisite, and I was responsible for clear recourse, upgrade our base, switch the strategy, and build extractor and send worker to mine gas. Train Mutalisk instead of Hydralisk when we versus Protoss. And I did a little bit of the macro management as well. And eventually I did the statistics win rate.
I'm going to talk about the parts that I implemented in this project. I implemented the part of the build order such as spawning pool, jargon training. I worked on attack scheduler and scout sending function. I also worked on the attack priority and defensive strategy function.
We have three main goals to achieve. First, we want to implement a bot play StarCraft by itself and it follows a build order and produce Zerglings as soon as it can. Then destroy our enemy with our Zerglings. If our boat cannot win the game with Zerglings, it should consider produce some more different units. 3. Try and do some micromanagement of our Zerglings or any combat unit that's intelligent. We have so many sub-problems to solve: how to build buildings in sequence and how to ensure buildings are not duplicated, how to choose the building locations, how to scout, how do we start attack, what shall we do if our scout worker is killed, how to find a specific unit from all the units we control, how to attack efficiently, attack priority, how to defend when we need, when do we change strategy and how to implement it.
Here I'm going to talk about the methodology for how do we build the buildings in sequence and how we make sure that buildings are not duplicated. We have a function called reconcile in Strategy Manager. This function is called in every frame. We take the spawning pool as an example. In every frame, we check if we need any spawning pool. If the answer is yes, that yeah, we need a spawning pool and we have enough resources to make the spawning pool, then we make sure that there is not another spawning pool is already building. If the answer is false, then we go ahead and make the spawning pool. In that way, we make sure that there is no duplicate building is growing up, and when the spawning pool is built, we set the parameter to false. How to scout? First, we need a specific worker and return its ID. Then I find the starting location that are not explored yet by BW API broadwords get start location function. Then we send a worker to each of these start location to find enemy. As soon as the board sees an enemy unit, it adds the enemy in a set called enemies and add position of the enemy buildings in the enemy pair. When our bot gets to see an enemy building, we call back our scout to the base with our set callback function. If our scout is destroyed for some reason, we assign another worker as a scout. It does the same thing again.
What a millisite is basically a site we use to contain all the compact units. Whenever a Zergling or a Hydralisk or a Zergling Mutalisk is finished, we add it to the millisite so we can control them. As you can see here, this function is called whenever a unit is finished or a building is finished. And if that unit or building is Zergling or Hydralisk or Mutalisk, we put them into the millisite. So now we know what a millisite is. The next problem is when do we start attack? Because we are doing the Zergling rush, so we want to finish the game as quick as possible. So that's why we decided to send our units out when we have at least 6 compact units. If we have at least 6 compact units, which is the size of the millisite, we send them out to enemy space and attack our enemy by the given priority. And the perimeter targets right here is all the visible enemy, is all the enemies we can see. What does that mean is, if we have at least 6 compact units, they will be sent to the enemy space and attack all the visible enemies by giving priority. And of course, we'll talk about the priority and this part later. This part is what I did for the micromanagement. We will talk about it later. So now we know how well our Zerglings attack our enemy that can be seen. But what if there's no enemy we can see? What if our scout didn't work out earlier? So here's the solution. If we cannot see any enemy buildings, then we send our Zerglings to the position we scouted earlier. The perimeter invisible position is the position of the buildings we have seen when our worker scouted. So what does that mean is, if there's no enemy we can see, we random a position to patrol, and we send our Zergling go there. If we haven't found any enemy yet, we send our Zerglings to scout. So if the scout didn't work out, we will send our Zerglings to scout, like go through all the start position.
I'm going to talk about how to attack efficiently and about our attack priority. We use Dr. Churchill's idea for the attack priority. We give different buildings and different units different priorities. Our combat unit attacks buildings and units with higher priority first. Our priority list goes as follows: defensive structure first, followed by combat units, special units, and workers. Then we go after the basic barracks, supply provider, buildings that cost gas and minerals, and other units. For example, I have a function called getAttackPriority, which set the attack priority of any unit type. Here we set the number of jerks, sunken colony, terrain bunker, protos photon cannon as 10, which are the defensive buildings. The second highest priority, because our home base gets the first priority if the base is under attack by enemy. So my attack units will attack them first, and then I set the opponent attack units such as Marine, Zealot, or Zergling as 9 um, at 9 attack priority, which gives them the third highest priority. It goes like that until the lowest priority. Then I have a function called getTarget, which gets the target for the melee unit to attack. It takes melee position and the target as input and outputs the target unit what should be attacked. GetTarget compare the priority and return a vector with which contains sorted enemy by its priority. I have another function called scheduleAttacker, which takes targets and the position as input. If the enemy is visible, we attack the target according to the set priority. In case enemy is not visible, then it goes back to the previously scouted places.
How to attack efficiently. Macromanagement. We found it inefficient to have all combat units attack only one target at a time. Therefore, we decided to allocate different numbers of combat units according to the size of the target unit. Therefore, under the same priority, the larger the target is, the more Zergling will attack it at the same time. The rest of Zerglings will attack other targets. So what I did here is I used this 8 as an iterator of the melee site, and this melee index represents how many combat units have been traversed, and this for loop means we use this for loop to use the subscript to traverse the sorted enemy by its priority. Then we calculate the height and width of the target enemy, which is its size, and then we allocate the combat units according to this enemy size. But if it's this target is the last target in the priority, then we just don't calculate it. We just send all the rest of the combat units to attack it. What is and why we need clear records? We must delete all the destroyed unit data, or otherwise our bot would still think that units exist. The parameter enemies represent all the enemy units, and the parameter enemies peers represent all the enemy's buildings. This function is called whenever a unit is destroyed. So whenever an enemy unit is destroyed, we will have to erase it from the enemy's set. If that is an enemy building was destroyed, we will have to erase it from the enemy's peers set. And same thing with our own units. We will have to call the unit manager clear unit records when our unit is destroyed. I will talk about that function later. And this function is called whenever we can't see an enemy unit. So whenever we cannot see it, we erase it. And this is the clear unit records in unit manager. It determines whether the destroyed unit was a probe or a combat unit. If it was a probe, we set the callback to true, so we won't send another one to scout. I know it's a conflict with sending more worker to Scott we talked about earlier, but I think it's a better way to do that. We can use the Zergling to Scott at this point. If we have at least 20 units, then we change our strategy to more units. Our bot will train some more workers and overlords, and our bot will build extra and upgrade our base when we use this strategy. We set the need extra and need moth to true, so they will actually build that building. For most of time, we upgrade our base when our resource is rich and when we have at least 20 units. In the reconcile, we confirm every frame what race we are fighting, and we will skip the hydraulics training if we are fighting Protoss. What that means is, if our enemy race is Protoss, we set the variable force to true, which will lead us base to start upgrading. When our base finishes upgrading, we will set the need spare to true and start training hydraulics to false, which means we will skip the hydraulics training if we are fighting Protoss. I hope it makes sense. Because our combat units will only attack enemies they can see, sometimes they will just stay in place when there is no target in sight. When there is no enemy in sight, we let the army wander around looking for the enemy.
Here I'm going to talk about how to defend when we need. We rarely encounter situations where we need to defend as our strategy is early attacking, but when we get attacked and we give the enemy's unit the highest priority. When the enemy is within 200 distance of our base, then they are the highest priority and our attack units will rush back to the base and attack the enemy units to defend the base.
Things we didn't have enough time to get done. First thing we tried, but never worked out, was we tried to move Zerglings who have low HP to the back of the army, but it's never worked out. Well, to be honest, it did work out. Well, it worked, but we also found that doing so will lower our win rates to against all the races. So we eventually removed it because it's not helpful. It's not necessary. So we finally removed it. We try to see if someone in melee side has lower percentage of the HP, lower than 50%, it moves to the back of the army. We test 94 games with the AI, which is almost 100 games. We have almost 100% win rate against Zerg and Terran race, but we only have 30% win rate against Protoss. Well, our biggest weak point is we have very poor defense. We have a very low win rate against Protoss. Even if we made a strategy against Protoss, it didn't improve very well. I believe that boosting the early defense to allow our Mutalisks to show up will significantly improve the win rate.
Overall, our strategy, Javelin Grouse, is very effective as most of the time we find our enemy off guard and we take the chance to attack them in the early game before they can make any significant move to defend our attack. So overall, our goal is complete and we win most of the games. But sometimes, if the opponent is also playing the same strategy as us, those type of games can be tricky and hard to win. And we can work on that in the future to improve our AI bot. From our winning rate, we can see that we win almost 90% of games against Shark and Terran race. So in fact, this is a fantastic achievement. But we also notice that we lose most of the games against Protoss race. Yeah, we will work on that on our code furthermore to achieve better result on against Protoss race in the future. One problem we didn't address from start to finish was that our combat units would only attack visible enemy forces. If there is no enemies inside, then our units will stay put. We made combat units walk around randomly when there is no targeted attacks in the hope of finding enemies, but the effect is mediocre.